The Behemoth Brewing Company presents the Department of Conversation with Pat Brittington. Behemoth, give me something hoppy.
As we welcome into the studio award-winning filmmaker Jan Oliver Lux, otherwise known as Ollie. Ollie, good morning to you from Dunedin in New Zealand. You are in Montreal, Canada right now. Hello and welcome.
Hi, Pat. Yeah, I'm in Montreal, sadly not in Dunedin, which is my home. But I'm on a bit of a journey since April, and I haven't had a chance to come back yet, but I will be back at one point.
So I was wondering that as well, because you are someone who was obviously was born or lived in Germany and then moved to New Zealand to study film about 15-ish years ago. Is New Zealand now home as well?
Yeah, I mean, New Zealand, Dunedin specifically, is home. I came to study film 2005, and then did my master's in science communication in Dunedin as well. Stuck around after that, and then I think from 2015, I had to sort of travel up to Auckland here and there for some money-making editing while directing my own stuff, mainly in Dunedin. So a lot of my directing work is based on Dunedin people that I know and I'm friends with.
Yeah, I remember I often think about comedians and when comedians perform, and I've always kind of wondered with a comedian, are they funny because their lives are weird and quirky, or are their lives weird and quirky because they're funny? You know what I mean? Like you hear a comedian telling a story about their life and you go, that's a hilarious story. If that happened to my life, I could probably get on stage and say it. Or are they able to get on stage and say it because which one, apple, chicken and egg situation? So are you, you didn't have the subject matter that you have. You do a lot of stuff around people you know in your documentary filmmaking. How would it then work for you? So is it you see the story and that makes the documentary, or you're a documentary filmmaker that finds the story?
Yeah, I think one of the things I learned in the natural history course in Dunedin, the science communication, was, if you look hard enough in your backyard, you will find stories there. Obviously, the course was more about filming nature, wildlife, and we had, an assignment where we were meant to document certain animals or a animal, and I picked the seagull because it was ubiquitous in Dunedin and easy to find and easy to stalk and film. So in that sense, I think that's sort of stuck. And when I'm living my life, things pop up in my circle of friends that I find interesting. And then, I talk to my friends about the idea of maybe putting it on camera, on film, and turning it into a story. And then that's how Characteristics of C Minor happened, a film that I did with Miranda Bellamy, also based in Dunedin, and that's how it happened with Wilberforce, about my best friend William McDougall, also based in Dunedin. And then when it came to Threesome, There's No I in Threesome, my latest film, I guess it was something that started happening in my life, and at the time I didn't see much other films or media about polyamory, open relationships. This was back 2014, 15. I think we were slightly ahead of the curve. A lot of stuff came out afterwards that, I talked to my fiance about putting us on camera because it was interesting. And that's the start of this journey.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. It's probably a professional broadcaster would have started like this. The reason we're talking to you today is people who are watching us can now see the trailer playing next to us. We haven't got the sound on, so we can keep talking, and also then that we don't get pulled off YouTube for it. It is There Is No I in Threesome, and I'm sure, of course, you have heard the joke, but there is an M and an E, obviously. And you have documented your delving into the world of open relationship, polyamory, being polyamorous, having other partners, primarily, I think, because you and your partner went to other ends of the country. And I think you said in the documentary that you didn't have a particularly, you didn't use the word raucous, I'll use that word though, but raucous 20s. And like before you get married, you sort of wanted to, I guess, for want of a better word, sow your seed a little bit.
Yeah.
And so this is the story of that journey. And I think that I'm really interested to talk to you about the process of creating the documentary. and how it all happened. I think what we'll do is we'll talk about that in the second part of this podcast, because there are some things in the documentary. I went into the documentary cold. I obviously knew its general subject matter, but I hadn't read any reviews, nothing like that, which is what I like to do. And there were some things that if I had have known about, the experience wouldn't have been as enjoyable. Well, it would have been as enjoyable, but there are some big things that I was like, whoa, So if we can talk more about, we will talk about those things, but we'll talk about them in the second part of the podcast. And I would really encourage people, when I say, okay, this is the moment that spoiler alerts are going to happen, that if you're going to watch this documentary, you step away and go and watch it at the New Zealand International Film Festival, then come back, because I think people will enjoy it more without knowing those things. Do you think that's fair?
That sounds like a plan. Yeah.
And when I say enjoy it more, I'm being careful, because obviously if people read reviews and stuff online, some of those things are revealed in those reviews, and it's still a very enjoyable watch. I'm not saying it's lesser quality, but I think it's cool to not knowing them. It's cool.
I remember seeing a bit of research. It was years ago, and I'm not sure if it's been debunked since then. I haven't followed up, but it was about this very topic, and knowing spoilers to films, and it actually argued that it increases the enjoyment of some or most people that are in on the spoilers, because they feel like the in crowd and they can look for other things and certain things. So you could totally make the counter argument, but I would really prefer if people went in cold. I think you get more out of it. So
I was talking to someone about this just yesterday, to do with your film, about the spoilers, and I said, the day that, and okay, spoiler alert, it's a 40-year-old spoiler alert, but the day that Star Wars was released, when Luke Skywalker knew that Darth Vader was his father, the first day that came out, a huge percentage of the population knew, because people come out of the movie theater and start talking about it. But on
the aspect, but yes.
But on the flip side of that, the latest Star Wars ones, when Han Solo dies at the hand of his son. Mm-hmm. Spoiler alert. My kids were there was at least one of my kids in intermediate school at that time, and I was walking towards a group of them, and I heard one of the kids say, "And Han Solo dies." And I'm like, "Fuck!"
Yeah.
Okay, didn't need to know it, but the truth is, when I then saw that happen, because of the age that I am, and Star Wars being quite formative in my early years, and Han Solo being someone who's a character who's been around in my whole life, I teared up. I got really emotional. So even though I knew it was coming, it was still something I could, well, you don't want to say enjoy, but certainly that created an emotional response, as art is supposed to do.
It comes at the end of a lot of story building, right? Like it's in the third act, and so there's a lot of build up, and you investing. Sorry if you hear sirens. I'm next to can you hear the sirens?
Yeah, are you being arrested?
No, I don't think they're here for me. It's kind of a weird area where I live. Where I'm staying. But yeah, it comes at the end of the film. So you spend a lot of time in a dark room, just exposed to one bright screen, and so there's a lot of work to be done by the filmmakers to get you invested and involved, and perhaps even forget that you know certain things.
Yeah. Hey, now one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this was, and I need to tell my story and not my ex-partner's story. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about this is you are telling your partner's story as well as your story. So it's a duo thing, but obviously you have an agreement to that. I have an ex-partner that I was married to, and I don't want to tell her story, but my story was there was an ending of a relationship, but it ended for reasons other than fuck you, I hate you. If people who know me and have been following me, they know that I've blogged about this, so they can read about it on my blog, but I'm always careful not to kind of delve into her story. But the reality is, it ended up on a unique situation where we sort of were still, I guess, in love, you'd say. We were still a couple. We had kids. And because of that, because of the reasons surrounding that, which is a bit weird that I won't talk about, but that's part of her story, we decided, what if we stayed? We didn't decide. We basically put everything on the table, literally everything, as to what we'd do moving forward. And one of the options that we put on the table was maybe we'd stay together in a unit, but have open relationships. Maybe we would would stay together as a family, mum and dad still living together, still on the same unit, but maybe we'd have other partners. And that was one of the options that we talked about, because we talked about all the options. Yeah, and it means that I actually went quite a long way down the path of looking into the idea of, open relationships and polyamory and that kind of thing. Now, for me, it never eventuated into that kind of relationship, but I feel like, and I was talking about this to a friend yesterday, I feel like maybe intellectually or academically, I understand it. I understand the idea or the concept of I've got enough love for more than one person. So that's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you about it. You've had an experience of it, and I have to say, and hopefully this is not offensive, it looks like from parts of the documentary a somewhat naive experience of it.
Definitely, yeah.
Kind of going into it, not realizing maybe some of the repercussions. I think I read one review of it, and it basically said you guys did it all wrong. You guys did it all wrong. And one of the things that was wrong about this idea is when you have long periods apart, then it's harder to have an open relationship. Actually, having an open relationship is easier when you're actually still together and quite, intimately close, because then it's a more of a day-to-day thing. But can you maybe give us a bit of a nutshell as to the reasons to get into it, the reason you went down that path, and your experiences of starting that idea of an open relationship?
Yep. So as I said, we were sort of in a long distance relationship. We had 6 or 8 months together in Dunedin. That's where we met. But then, had to sort of move to other ends of the country. And I guess it was always something that I was curious about. And so was my fiance. And then we just had an open discussion about wishes and fantasies and desires, and which was lovely. There was a lot of openness, no judgment. Me being bisexual, or sort of coming out as bisexual in that relationship, she was really warm and assuring. And then so we moved to different ends of the country, and it was around the time that Tinder started happening.
Oh yeah,
2014, 15. And so easy enough to make a profile and put in there that we're in an open relationship. We didn't blindside anyone. But I think there was a lot of excitement when Tinder came out, and a lot of matches. And it sort of became quite easy to find someone for her to hook up with. Not so much for me when I was looking just sort of for, finding a woman to be in a casual engagement with. And I'm not sure how far I should spin this, but that's at the start it was great. A lot of euphoria, a lot of naivety, but it sort of slid into later polyamory, because we had rules sort of set for each other that it would be just one-night stands, and at the start just sort of with the same sex. But then because it went so well for months, we became quite enamored with our success, and just a bit foolish, and just push the envelope further and further. Didn't follow the rules that we set out for each other anymore. But also exists there sort of in the polyamory community. We didn't really engage with the community when we started doing this. I know there's support groups in Dunedin and Auckland and all kinds of in all centers of New Zealand that help you to do this properly, but we didn't. And it was an interesting experience. I think there's definitely a difference between open relationships and polyamory, and I'm not sure on how far you explored that with your thinking with your ex-partner, whether you would go for one over the other, or were you just interested in polyamory?
I think the answer to your question is I don't know, because I never actually got to a point of partnering with anyone else or being with anyone else. It was all very academic for me. It was just thinking about and investigating and that sort of thing. So I don't know, because it was a situation where we were a family unit, and we were thinking, are we going to stay together as a family unit, or are we going to separate and go our own ways, which is ultimately what we did. Then it was like everything's on the table. I think for me, probably thinking about it now, polyamory is probably, because we had kids, polyamory would probably sit better with that world than open relationship, because I think open relationship and I think one night stands, that kind of stuff, and that's not something that I'd like. I have boarders in my house in Dunedin right now. I have students come through, and I'm a little bit patronizing to them. I say, this is a house for grown-ups. If the dishwasher needs to be cleared out, clean it out, yada yada yada. But I say the one rule I say is, if you're going to have a one night stand, it happens in their house. I've got kids, they live in this house. You know, I obviously don't care or judge you for what you want to do sexually. That's completely up to you. I say partners are welcome. One night stands happen at their houses. That's about the only house rule I've got for my boarders. So I think following from that theme, if I was to think where would it have gone, probably more in the realms of polyamory than open relationship, probably. But genuinely, I don't know.
It's so great that you were able to project yourself into this potential future of polyamory and see sort of the cleavage between reason and emotion, because that was certainly one of the problems for me and us, I think, and what we did. You know, we tried to put borders around how we would react emotionally with the manifesto, as we called it, you know, writing down rules for ourselves. But as I said, you get so enamored, and emotion can so easily override reason, as it did, unless you have other safeguards in place, I guess, or are more experienced. Like I think it also has to do with maturity. Like I was a very different person when we did this, which is now 6-7 years ago. I think I'm a bit wiser now and understand that sort of difference a bit better between emotion and reason. I think I might also be fooling myself, because that's the other thing. Like you think your reasonable part of your brain is in charge, but really it's just emotion tricking you, giving you the rational excuses to make emotional decisions.
I'm just writing down another question for in the future that's bounced off that, but I don't want to just leave this point for a minute, because you talked about the idea of non-judgmental, and in the documentary, you and your partner both talk about, it's Zoe, isn't it? So you and Zoe both talk about, you know, jealousy will happen, but we shall squash it down. I personally think maybe one of the areas that many who have trouble in the area of open relationship or polyamory is this idea of squashing jealousy or not being judgmental. And I think we as a society have words that we think are bad when they're just words. It's like I had a conversation the other day about being unvaccinated or vaccinated, and using the word I'm happy. I said this to a person. I'm happy to and it's funny, I'm talking about the word and the words just jumped out of my head. Discriminate. I'm happy to discriminate against someone who's unvaccinated. And of course I got a huge amount of abuse back at me because I used the word discriminate. But I went, but hang on, we discriminate every day of the week all over the place. We discriminate against 63-year-olds getting the pension because they're not 65. We discriminate against I guess people without driver's licenses to being able to drive. The word discriminate is not bad. And I also think that maybe we think the word judgment, as you've just used, and in the documentary I thought about the word jealousy as a negative thing. Perhaps jealousy is the appropriate response, and then trying to squash that down and go, okay, I'm feeling the jealousy, but I'm going to push it aside, is actually the wrong move. Maybe there's a reason to be jealous, and maybe it is the correct response, and maybe that's a signal that in this moment something's wrong, not I'm going to push it down and make something right. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think there's ways to deal with jealousy that, again, I'm sure the polyamory community has spreadsheets of how to help people with that. But there's one thing. It's one thing, you know, knowing the logic of it, and another thing actually emotionally going through it. And I think it would be a lot of work. And as you said, I think the first thing I want to say, I think you're right. I think not being jealous would be the unnatural or abnormal response to that kind of scenario. So that's true. But I also think the argument that you can work through jealousy and come out the other end must be true, because some people are able to do it. I learned for myself that I either can't or don't want to go on that journey, because it's a freaking long and hard road. So I made the decision to not to spoil too much, but to not be polyamorous in my life, because obviously the jealousy part I can't work through.
Well, I have to say, watching your documentary, and it's not something that's been a thought in my mind, you know, for several years. But, you know, back in those days when I was investigating and thinking and going, how would this work? But I have to say that your documentary has been the wrapping of it for me. Has been like me going, this absolutely is not my cup of tea. And it's not that I've been actively thinking about maybe it is or maybe it could be, but I don't think I'd ever quite got to the point that, you know, after all that investigation, could this still work? But your documentary, I realized last night, was the final exclamation mark that it's not a lifestyle for me.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's sort of a cautionary tale for people who are interested in it, who might still want to pursue it, but then not make the mistakes I made. And I think, obviously we were very naive and did things wrong, but I also don't think that the mistakes we made or the ways we were naive in are uncommon. So at least you can see what you're up against if you go down that path.
I'm wondering about how the polyamorous community has responded to this, because I was just thinking for the first time just then, perhaps some might think this doesn't paint the polyamorous lifestyle in a very positive way, without giving away too much yet. So have you had a response from people in the community? Has it been positive? Has it been negative? What have they said?
I'm guessing, I think it's mostly negative. I mean, since the film came out in America on HBO Max, I've kind of been pretty good at staying away from comments and posts and Twitter things, just for my own mental health. There's a lot of me on display in the film, and then a lot of me being stupid and making mistakes. So I've stayed away. But from what I gathered sort of on the periphery is that there is at least a chunk of the polyamorous community that is upset, as you say, about the way they are portrayed in the film, or even that we would call ourselves polyamorous in the film because the way we did it isn't the right way, which might be true. I think what it is really for me is, as I said, a cautionary tale of what we did and what you could avoid doing. But I also don't think it's a film about polyamory. I think it's a film about a relationship that tried something else, that sort of dabbled in open relationships and then later polyamory. I don't think it's in any way, shape, or form an objective look at that lifestyle. I think there's other sources that you could look at for that. But also I would say that we started making the film as a documentary that is very much for and pro polyamory, because at the time, as I said, we didn't know anyone else that was doing what we were doing. And we were so excited by it. We kept talking about it. We wouldn't shut up about it, and alienated some of our friends by hitting on them. We just made all the mistakes. But because we were so excited about it, we wanted to show the world how you can have an alternative relationship style to monogamy. And it stayed that sort of pure positive documentary for, I don't know, month, 2 months into filming before things started changing. But yeah, I mean, I know some people have trouble with it. I think because it's subjective and it's my story, like I told my story, and I don't think like it's so, yeah, it's fine. I also one more thing I want to mention. In Berlin, I bumped into someone. I was in Berlin recently who saw the film and who is polyamorous, and I was sort of it's like the first person I met after the film had come out who was openly polyamorous, and I sort of was prepared for the worst. But he said he liked the film and he didn't understand the backlash, because to him, polyamory means that you don't follow a rule book. Like with polyamory, you make up your own rules, and that's kind of part of it for him. I'll just leave that there. But yeah,
I think one of the things I learned, and one of the things I see in your documentary as well, is the one rule of polyamory seems to be brutal honesty.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that they all seem to be, agreed on is you have to be brutally honest. And again, I think about that in a monogamous, I was going to say non-polyamorous, that has a word, doesn't it? Monogamous relationship. And obviously honesty is typically the best policy, but there is an element of this, polyamorous world where the word brutal does make sense. It means, when you have to tell someone that this is not the documentary, this is in general, that you're in love with someone else as well, that must be a very confronting moment. But if you're not brutally honest about it and start having secrets, then it becomes problematic. So it's like watching it. What do they say? It's like watching an open wound on my camera. Yeah. And I'm going to let you answer this, and then I'm going to fix my camera. But it's like an open wound. Everything goes out there.
Yeah. And I should also say, like, I think a lot of the skill set that you have to have successful open relationships or polyamorous relationships is really admirable, and something that I think, as I said, honesty, good communication skills, that's sort of paramount, and there's a real beauty to it, that you have to have those skills. But there's also a difference between being honest in the form, like being honest, whether it's with one sentence or you spend a whole week talking about what you're trying to convey. There's a lot of aftercare and care in general that you have to put into your partner when delivering certain truths. And that takes a lot of work, which was another aspect of polyamory that wasn't for me. You need a clear schedule and a lot of time for talking and debating and negotiating. And there's a lot of that in a monogamous relationship. But then if you not just multiply it but square it for more than one partner, which you have to do, because otherwise you end up, as you said, delivering blows that can seem quite cruel, rather than packaging through truths in sort of cling film or bubble wrap to not have them hurt as much.
Without talking down the idea of polyamory, and again, I don't particularly want the community to come after me. I don't really care, but I don't particularly want it. I do wonder if it actually can be an authentic relationship. I do wonder because as I'm watching the documentary, I'm thinking sometimes we say things to people like, for example, I'm not going to be jealous, because they're the right thing to say in that moment, not because we actually believe them ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if it's a world, this is now my naivety speaking, even though I've said I've investigated it. I wonder if there's a world where there's a lot of I'm saying and doing what I'm supposed to, rather than actually what I feel is normal and natural. It's the suppressing thing again. I don't know. I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that.
Do you mean that sort of touches on the the divide between rationality and emotional response again? Or?
Yeah, a little bit. It's also playing a role. It's like I'm not supposed to be upset, so I won't be upset, even though your natural inclination is to be upset. But you're playing the role of not being upset because that's what you're supposed to do in the situation when you're free love, happy, open. And I guess I'm sounding like a bit of a prick, and I get that, kind of questioning the authenticity of these relationships, but it's just something I'm wondering.
I'm not sure I have that much to say about that. I mean, all I can say is from my own personal experience is that when it became too hard and too much to deal with on top of my workload I had at the time, as you see in the film, I hide behind my camera to not deal with those truths and perhaps pay lip service to what my partner wanted to hear, but it wasn't necessarily what I was feeling. And perhaps I didn't even know that consciously at the time, because I was too busy and too much hiding behind the camera. And then it suddenly sort of all caught up with me with a big bang, rather than digesting it slowly. And I'm not sure how far that's a common experience, so I can't really talk to that. But certainly for me, at one point in the relationship, I was paying lip service and not really saying the things I was feeling. That's true.
So one of the things you kind of touched on it, you're talking a bit about, and I'm paraphrasing now, you'll be able to pick up on what I'm talking about, when you were talking about being behind the camera, and it seems like you were, maybe you were, and maybe also Zoe was as well, when Zoe was behind the camera, looking for someone else to validate what you were going through in that moment. Mm-hmm. It's like you're needing the camera to say this is okay, because it becomes the documentary story rather than it becomes a film. Mm-hmm. Rather than this is my life. And I wrote down one of the quotes that was used several times. I can be other versions of myself, which was said several times within the documentary in several different ways. Like, part of the ideas of being polyamorous is I can be other versions of myself. And I thought, again, maybe that's one of the reasons where some of the polyamorous community aren't that happy about it, or maybe that's one of the reasons where in this documentary there was a mistake made, because I think, don't we always want to be our authentic self? And trying to be other versions of ourselves, I just thought to myself, does that speak? And I think at the end of the documentary, which we'll talk about in a bit, which we're not talking about now, this question's kind of answered, because when I saw it obviously in the documentary a third of the way in, I didn't know how it was going to end. So I wrote this down as I was watching it. Mm-hmm. But it spoke of sort of insecurities and kind of conflict within yourself, mm-hmm. that maybe there's another version of me which is better out there, and if I get to be 7 different people to 7 different partners, I'll figure out the one which is the best, and then I'll run with that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think for me, so if the idea of more versions than yourself, that is definitely a line I picked up one-to-one from a person who's much smarter than me and manages to be a successful polyamorous. and so not, I was clearly saying it, not really believing it myself, or being it myself. And sort of in hindsight, I mean, that's the great thing about having done this project. It's interesting to see myself on camera in that sort of documentary format, and having lived, I think it was 6 months that really came down to the footage that we captured, and seeing the version of myself that I was on camera, and the realization that perhaps my partner, my fiance, and I weren't perfectly matched for each other, and I was trying to figure out to be a version of myself that would fit her better, and not really thinking about the version of myself that was authentic, that was just me. And as I say in the film, comfortable to just be lazy and lie in bed all day on a certain day. Like I guess I just never felt good enough for her, and that's probably more my fault than hers. I'm not saying that she made me feel that way, but I think that was. So I'm not sure I can ascribe that to polyamory itself, but rather this specific relationship that I was in at the time. But in terms of also versions of yourself, I think there's something to be said. Everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people have social media and create TikToks and Facebook posts and whatever, and put themselves out there. And I think a lot of people will be familiar with the idea that, once you turn on the camera, is that really your authentic self, or is it a heightened version, or do you put on a certain mask to perform? And that was certainly the case for me when, I pointed the camera at us living our lives and being in a relationship. I was I guess I tried to be funnier. I tried to be more dramatic, and in a way, I wonder sometimes in how far I created certain small to big scale drama scenarios, because I was filming it, which is totally in conflict with a healthy relationship. So I think that having the camera there played a big role in sort of which version of myself I was at the time.
Talking about filming it, there was a scene in it, and there's no spoilers here, well, other than saying what the scene is. There was a scene in it where you guys were in a canoe on a lake in Central Otago, I think.
Yeah.
And Zoe kind of pulls her shirt up, and she displays, she's like having fun, and then you share that moment, and she goes, I'm going to send this photo to someone else. Someone else actually seeing another moment. And it was another thing that I thought in the moment there, and this is just my thoughts again, not casting aspersions on other people who do this, or people who do this, not other people, is that how can you be intimate in that very moment with that very person when you've got other people living rent free in your head that you're sharing those moments with? Well, and in that particular moment when she said straight away, I'm going to text this to such and such, I was like, oh, that's interesting, because there was other points in the documentary where Zoe was saying to you, kind of, I'm not interested in talking to you through the camera, I want to talk to you. So there's moments where obviously you in the documentary were sort of hiding behind the camera, like you've said, but then equally there was moments where Zoe was not engaging with you authentically, because there was other people in her head as well that she was thinking about and wanting to share those moments with, when it wasn't their moment.
I mean, that's sort of the crux of the problem I had personally with polyamory for me, because sorry, I'll just wait that to pass. You're in a relationship, you're special for one person in all the ways, and then when you open up your relationship or you become polyamorous, slowly that sort of special status gets whittled away, and you perhaps become special for certain parts of the other person's life, but not as much. And I certainly struggled with that, and feeling like I have less and less of Zoe to myself, who's never my property. Of course, she's her own person, but you build something, you build a unity, the us, and you sort of start making cuts into it, and something seeps in from the outside. And that scene is a good example of that. But also, I think as with social media, I think it's quite common that for me anyway, I get annoyed at friends sometimes, when you're having a moment and like a nice, I don't know, nice dinner or whatever, and it feels like a great sort of atmosphere and beautiful time. And as soon as you pull the phone out and the document it and put it on Facebook, it becomes something else, you know. It invites the world in and robs it of that special status, for me at least.
I was listening to a conversation between two comedians on a podcast not too long ago, and one of them was talking to the other one. They're both fairly high profile, so they're privileged to be able to go around the world and do their craft.
Yeah.
And one of them was like, I don't ever tell anyone where I am. I never mention the name of the restaurant. I never do any of these things. Whereas the other one is someone who's like I always give shout outs to everywhere that I go. And the first comedian was like, well, apart from anything else, if you want to go back to that restaurant in a year's time when you're back in that country and you don't want it to be full of fucking American tourists, he's like, I actually want, he'll put a photo on of his experience, but he'll say, you know, at a bar. He won't say the name of the bar. So he's figured out a way to be able to maybe share his life a bit more authentically without trying to flex as to what it is and where he is and what he's doing, sort of thing. And I think that's I think we'll probably learn as we go on how to use social media in a more healthy way. And I think that's an interesting, he's sort of got even though he could also just not show what he was doing, but if you're gonna show it, I feel like he's got a bit more of an authentic take on it, maybe.
How do you navigate that yourself? Because obviously you share things about yourself on the podcast, and I'm not sure if your blog is still going. Do you write about yourself there as well?
I don't really blog anymore. I do very occasionally blog. My blog did turn into, when I was going through the marriage breakup, there was a lot, probably a half dozen or so blog pieces, maybe more, maybe 10, about what we were going through. Yeah, but at the moment it's more, if I do something, it's because I've seen something in the news. It's more news commentary and that sort of thing. So I don't really blog anymore, but I kind of am of the belief, it's sort of following the Howard Stern model from his movie, and what he does is it's got to all be up for grabs if you're going to do it. It's all or nothing.
But also, where do you draw the line? Like, if you leave your office or the recording studio, do you still do Instagram posts and Twitter posts and so on, or do you just sort of then switch off and stop sharing what you're doing with the world? I find that really hard with, you know, when we were starting to film everything. Like, where would I stop filming? And it sort of became this monster where I everything I did or thought or was happening, I put through the filter of, would this be good on camera? And it was not a good way to live.
I'll tell you, and I'll do this while we're doing it. I'll tell you a little story that speaks to how probably not being very good at that has disproportionately affected me in my career. So as you can see from my this is my Facebook page. I don't post a lot. I mean, that was 19th of October, which is 3 days ago, and this is just a live feed. That's not even really a post. That's a post from 4 years ago, which is a memory about vaccination. So I don't actually do a lot on social media, and that's actually something that has probably hampered my career. I remember when I started working in talk radio, and I was working for News Talk ZB, and I went to the bosses and I was like, you know, this is what we're doing. And one of the main bosses there, who was a lovely, lovely man, said to me, you know, when Paul Holmes started, he'd go to the opening of a paper bag. Right. You know, if there was a camera there, if there was a carpet there, he would go there. And I said to him, as probably a 32-year-old, I'm not going to do that. And he said to me bluntly, that's fine. It'll affect your career.
So confirmed now with a bit of hindsight and looking at your profile on Facebook there.
I think that I made the right decision because I'm not really interested in that world. I have drawn lines. Like when I was working in radio, I've never mentioned my children's name on the radio. I've never mentioned my children's names on this podcast. I'll say, you know, Miss 15. If I'm doing a text about it or a tweet, I'll say, oh, look, here's a quote from Miss 15. But I won't say her name. So I do have lines that I've drawn personally, but because I'm not someone who spends a lot of time in the world of social media, and it's not really, I don't drive that. I probably should drive it more. It's kind of something that doesn't really impact me as a conflict because it's not something I really do very much. I mean, as I say, probably detrimentally. Probably when I finish this podcast, I should cut it up in 14 different ways into. That's the thing
where to stop. Like you could keep cutting it up into smaller and smaller chunks for shorter and shorter attention spans. Like I just deleted my Facebook and Instagram a couple months ago, and it's great. Like I'm still on Twitter, but I don't really post there. I'm just sort of more putting things out, like the films coming out on the festival, and then I'll mention that. But just not having to produce content for an audience that might be waiting, although they're not usually waiting. They're just there, and then someone else monetizes off of it. Like you don't make any of the money. I'm just glad I got off there, and I will see if it affects my career and how it'll affect my career. Maybe it was stupid, but I'm glad I did it. And I'm putting myself into my work. Like I feel like I don't have to then also put every other minute of what I do on social media on top of that.
Yeah, but you can see as it's playing in the background while you're looking at me. I mean, I'm not particularly active. I have the things,
yeah,
but I'm not particularly like and a bunch of the like this is a podcast I did with another filmmaker on Tuesday. That's on my Twitter. And other than that, between the last couple of podcasts, there's a few things. 18th of October I put a couple up. 16th of October I put a couple up. Then 13th. So it's not even anywhere near one a day.
Yeah,
it's one every 3 or 4 days, other than my podcast and stuff, which I'll automatically upload there. So I find it quite easy to draw a line there because I don't use it very much.
Yeah.
It's not something that I'm driven to use. I say again though, probably detrimentally to my exposure or my career, but I don't care. I mean, I do this because I want to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm constantly getting people saying, "Why don't you have more viewers?" And I'm like, "No, I'll do what I want to do, and it'll find the audience." And
the other thing as well, like just harking back to what you said earlier about feedback from the polyamory community. Like I got because I had Instagram and Facebook when the film came out, and until a few months ago, there were a lot of like 90%, 95% of messages I received on the direct messages were positive and lovely and supportive, and people could relate. But then there's one or two that were not that, and sometimes quite spiteful. But obviously, I only think about the 1 or 2% that were not friendly. So what's the point of, if the 98% of positive messages don't affect me as much as the 2% that are negative, then for my own mental health, I think it's best if I'm not on there. Yeah,
it's like if you're playing a round of golf and you have 16 good holes, and then you finish with the last 2 holes or 2 quadruple bogeys, then you've had a terrible round of golf. But if you do the opposite and you have 16 average holes and then get 2 birdies in a row, you're like, what a fucking amazing game of golf, But look, I think I'm a little bit unique in this situation as well. And this is not a flex, but I was the most complained about host on News Talk ZB. I got told that by my bosses, because I
wearing it like a badge. That's
but I think part of the reason is I'm guess what I don't wear labels very well, but I'm mostly what other people would call left wing or progressive or whatever, and that on a conservative radio station, when you're saying to a 67-year-old redneck right wing voter, why do you think that should happen to solo mums, and they can't answer it. They think that's me arguing with them, where really it's just me just going, you haven't thought this through. But as a 33-year-old saying that to an 80-year-old, I was complaining about. But the thing that happened with that is, back in the day, there used to be message boards and stuff, which was the social media of the day. So this is 10, 12, 15 years ago, and as an absolute bottom of the totem pole talkback host, I would have full threads on the Trade Me Facebook pages being written about me. And honestly, I couldn't give a fuck. In fact, it was actually kind of funny that people were wasting their time. I watched Dave Chappelle's special the other day, and he was talking about how people have been piling on him on Twitter. And he goes, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't know whether he's I don't give a fuck, but he basically goes, I don't give a fuck because Twitter's not a real place. And I think that's the truth. Twitter's not a real place. Trade me message boards are not a real place. They don't impact my life. But that might also be testament to how I guess I say this hopefully with no arrogance, but have a healthy mental health balance in my life as well.
And 9 out of 10 that would be true, but then you have that one day off where you are perhaps struggling a bit and happen to open the app and get a bad message, and that sort of makes it worse. So
maybe
we'll talk spoilers. I really want to talk.
All right, well, let's do this.
More about something else.
Let's do this. I'm going to just go full screen for a second like this, just to say to people, this is an amazing documentary. There are some amazing things about it. Let me bring up the International Film Festival page so people can see. There are some amazing things about it, and I think if you can, if you can drag yourself away from this amazing conversation, what you should do now is stop listening, stop watching. I'm genuinely suggesting this to you because I saw this documentary without having any knowledge as to what it was going to be. Not what it was going to be, but the how the content was going to play out. I stayed away from previews and I stayed away from all that so I could get some of the I didn't realize at the time, but some of the should we say special moments without knowing they were coming.
Yes.
So I'm going to really encourage you now, and you've got like 10 seconds to pause this or stop this, to stop while we have like a 10-minute chat with some spoiler alerts. And then when you've seen the documentary, which is playing at the New Zealand International Film Festival, if you're like me and you've got a VPN, you can watch it on HBO Max, which is how I saw it, because I have an account there. Then you can come back and get the rest of this, because there's questions I have about some of those parts of the documentary that you probably will want answered as well after you've seen the documentary. So pause, and we'll see you.
And as I said, also, it'll be the only place in the world where you can see it in a cinema, because HBO Max has the rights to all of it except for a cinematic release in a small window in New Zealand. So if you don't see it now as part of the New Zealand International Film Festival, I'm not even sure when you'll see it again on New Zealand screens, apart from doing a VPN thing. But yeah, and I'm super jealous because I'm not in New Zealand and I can't actually, seeing something in the region, is one of the best places to see anything. And
so you haven't seen it on a big screen?
So proud. I mean, we had one crew screening in Auckland, and I showed it to a few friends and family at the Metro in Dunedin, actually, which is also in cinema. But otherwise, yeah, seeing it with an audience that hasn't had no knowledge of it before, I mean, I wish I was there, and I wish I could be there, but I'm not.
I suspect there'll be a moment if you got a full, an absolute full studio. A full theater of people who had no knowledge. There'll be a particular moment where they all go. There'll be a particular moment where you'll do it. So that's it. Spoilers are coming, right? If you want to be able to experience that moment, then fuck off. I mean it in the nicest possible way. And we'll see you after you've seen the documentary. Right. I think that's fair enough.
Thanks for that. Yep. Cheers.
Now,
welcome back.
I hope you've been to see the documentary and you're back with us now.
Spoiler is we broke up.
Yeah, well, there's several spoilers. I'm really interested in the spoilers about the making of the documentary as well and how you made it. Yeah. So this is a new genre, I think, in film, because it's probably technically not a documentary, because on some level it's a based on a true story film, because there's actors in it. I mean, it might be completely accurate and true, but the thing we're going to talk about is your fiance in the film was not your fiance. How did you? So I'll nutshell it, because we've only got 10 minutes.
Yep.
But you started filming this film for real.
Yep.
Documentary.
Yep.
At the end of the film, it doesn't end well, and you realize, as you've already said in this podcast, polyamory is not for you. Definitely. There was a separation and a breakup.
Yep.
And I'm assuming what then happened is either because of where you were, you didn't want to show your ex, or maybe your ex said at that moment, you're not using my footage. But for some reason that then wasn't used. So count forward 2 or 3 or 4 years, you were like, I still want to tell this story. I'm not going to use my actual ex in this story. So let's reshoot what I assume is a scene for scene retelling with an actress, and then finish telling this documentary.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. I mean, as you said, we did definitely start making a documentary together, her filming her side, me filming my side. And because we're long distance, meant we had sort of 2 parallel stories going in 2 different directions. And it was interesting how they both developed. But then, yeah, as you said, the breakup happened. And my ex, while she didn't want to be involved in the making of the film, did give me permission to make it. Like, otherwise we wouldn't have made it. And, we got her green light sort of across along the way several times, actually. And you can still hear her voice at the end, but she just didn't want to be in it because she's got her own life now. And she married the guy that she left before. And she is, I think, as embarrassed about the naive part as I am. We were very naive at the time, and the mistakes we made. And I don't blame her. I kind of sometimes wished I could just move on from it and not redigest it for 5 years in sort of a film form, but I did, and I chose to do that, and these are the rewards. Yeah, we cast actress Natalie Medlock in Auckland, who also became the co-writer to them with me, scripted out roughly what exactly happened and what scenes we could use from the original material, because again, we were long distance, so I had my side of the story, she had hers. We didn't use her footage, obviously, but we could use mine, so there's still a good chunk of the film that is the original documentary footage. And then it became the challenge of blurring and meshing them so that you don't notice what's real and what's recreation, and that was obviously the biggest challenge of all. And yeah, just the success and getting HBO on board is testament to us doing a good job, which I'm really stoked about, because otherwise I would have wasted a lot of time on something that didn't work.
Out of interest, because it's, there's footage in there that's shot from your ex-fiance, not Zoe in the actual thing. Is she still credited as like a producer, or does she have some ownership of it, or does she give it all to you?
No, I mean, there was a negotiation period, and she got some money to, be okay with us using her story as much as my story. And the times when you see me being filmed by her, that's still my footage. We didn't use her footage; it was still on my camera. But yeah, otherwise, we were quite careful that there weren't any traces that would lead back to her because of toxic online communities and doxing or whatever might happen. So you'd be hard pressed to find any sort of link of us online, because we cleared all that up.
So her name's not Zoe and his name's not Tom?
No.
Yeah. Okay, well then let me ask you this question, because it was one of the things, because obviously I'm assuming it's accurate to the original footage you had. Did you just recreate scenes?
Yes. The only scene that didn't happen like that is the jumping off the 10-meter tower. Otherwise, everything happened. I mean, sometimes things would be said in 2 different rooms, and we would put it together in one sentence in one room, like small things like that. But otherwise, we were pretty faithful to the story, because it was a good story. Like, the way it played out was so dramatic. As I said before, for better or worse, I may have, in part deliberately, stirred it that way by filming it and being an idiot and putting the film above my relationship. And while the relationship didn't survive, it made for good drama and made for a good story. And yeah, that's what you see.
So there was one part, and this is what I wanted to ask you. Maybe you do, maybe you don't know, but Zoe, the fiance character, was in Auckland with Tom. Now, people who have seen the documentary know what we're talking about, so we can be blunt. And they were having a conversation about what part of Zoe was for Tom. But it was never revealed what part of Zoe was for Tom. Are you able to tell us what part of Zoe was for Tom? Do you know? Are you able to explain?
Yeah, I mean, there's an implication that the part for him was, that sort of hormone-drenched, love-infused, crazy, screwing around like bunny rabbits phase of a fresh new relationship. I think NIE, new relationship energy, as the polyamorous card calls it. That certainly wasn't the case in our relationship anymore, because we've been together for 3 years by that time. But the idea of not being able to let go of each other and having to touch each other all the time, 24/7, I think that was reserved for him at that moment. And yeah, we didn't have that.
It's a very exciting thing for people to check out. I'm going to bring up the International Film Festival. So nziff.co.nz. If you just search for the word threesome, which you should only do on the NZIFF site, not on Google in general.
There should only be one film called with the word threesome at the really prestigious New Zealand International Film Festival.
You'll find it, and you'll find out when it's on. Obviously, Auckland's been shut down, but Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin. Is it showing in all 3? Do you know?
Yeah. So far, I mean, fingers crossed things, steady out and don't get worse. We were lined up for the Civic in Auckland, which, again, was a real dream of mine, and I'm gutted that doesn't happen. But Regent obviously is almost as big, so I'm excited that it's screening there.
I'm wondering how other filmmakers, or maybe even people in the industry, like maybe people at HBO, have reacted to this twist. So we've talked about that Natalie Medlock is playing your fiance, and it gets revealed in the film, as people who are now listening, because they've all seen it, obviously, by all of a sudden there's a wide shot where you're coaching her through the most dramatic part of the whole thing, which is like the breakup scene, and you're in the room when you're supposed to be at the other end of the country, and so you're actually directing her, and that's when you go, that's the moment. For people who have seen it, they'll know. I'm wondering how other filmmakers, producers, directors, the people at HBO Max have reacted to you about that scene, because that's when I say this feels like a new genre of film. That there was a bit where I kind of went, fuck me, what am I watching now? I'm like, hang on, is this a story? I mean, is this a I actually asked, is this a mockumentary? Is this real? And so it took me a few minutes to jump back in and go, okay, so I see what's happening now. So that particular moment, you must have lots of people who are in the industry talk to you about that moment. How's it been received?
I mean, there are a few films that sort of blur the lines a bit, and there is a bit of a trend, or has been for the last few years. One of my mentor, thanks to Script to Screen, on this film was Kitty Green, who did Casting John Bonet, which was on Netflix, and that definitely played with the format. Then there's Sarah Polley's what's the name? Anyway, there's a few films that sort of blend and blur. What's the Sarah Polley film? It's going to bug me. Anyway, Stories We Tell, which was a big influence on this film. Everyone should check it out. So it's not groundbreaking new, but I agree that there aren't many films that do it. And I can see why, because it's, we all have bullshit detectors in us by consuming things 24/7 on our phones, on social media and YouTube and whatever. And so pulling it off without people realizing that it's not real is a real challenge. And it's not a mockumentary, because a mockumentary like The Office is a good example. Uses the format to make jokes and be funny. We're not quite that. We sort of I sort of resist putting a genre on it, because it's a bit of a debate. Obviously it's not a pure documentary, but it has documentary elements. So yeah, it's a film.
Has it been received well within? I mean, you've had some success with some of your other work around the world at various festivals. Is it doing the rounds? Has it had any uptake in the festival world?
We haven't actually tried for any festivals except Sundance, and we got shortlisted. So annoying that we almost made it, but we didn't. And then because HBO already owned it, they were keen to get it out as soon as possible. And once it's out on a streaming platform, you really don't. There aren't many, if any, film festivals that accept a film if it's on a streaming platform, because obviously they get something out of it if it's exclusive and people can't see it elsewhere. So the festival route wasn't the way to go anymore. As I said, except for New Zealand, because we really wanted to bring it home and see it on the big screen, because we had funding from the Film Commission, and I think it's. I mean, I'm going to say it's probably the best way to see it, but it'll be. One of the reasons I'm gutted that I can't be there to see it, say at the Regent with, hopefully it sells out and then a lot of people around you. I wanted to see what it's like to witness some of the scenes that you have seen, like the enema or other things that are perhaps quite embarrassing, especially to a New Zealand audience. There's also a difference between how much Kiwis reveal of themselves versus Americans who just overshare constantly anyway. And I think that was sort of my point of difference of being in New Zealand as a filmmaker, is that New Zealanders, and especially New Zealand men, perhaps aren't that great with vulnerability often, and and just sort of absorbing the atmosphere and seeing whether people are embarrassed to see it on the big screen next to people that know or not, or whether then it was better to just see it on a TV at home. Like it's sort of a social experiment that's unfolding in New Zealand.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how that pans out. I think that, I didn't find it. It's confronting in the themes around it, but the actual imagery and the footage, I think, maybe I'm not a prude. I don't know. I wonder if, again, I don't mean to reference comedians 3 times in one podcast, but often people say they come to Dunedin expecting it to be fairly raucous because of the students, but the front row is not usually the place you see lots of clapping. People sit on their hands a little bit. So maybe Dunedin is a bit more reserved, and maybe Auckland will be different from the other parts of the country. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no idea. And how will it play? I'm not sure if it'll play in gore, but that would be interesting to see as well.
Hey, listen, we got to let you go because you got more interviews and stuff coming up. What are you working on right now?
Right now, I'm developing a series with, teaming up with Wilbur again, who was obviously in some of my past work and is in this film again, and sort of exploring how to be alpha males and terribly failing at it. That's what we're working on developing and pitching soon to streamers.
And as a filmmaker, how does that work? So obviously, I mean, I like knowing about people's finances, not personally, but you've got this film out at the moment. Are you just currently living off proceeds of the film while you're developing something else? Do you have other lines of income coming in? What do you do?
No, I mean, because I'm not in New Zealand, it's a bit difficult to work where I am right now and traveling. So I am and have been living off my savings since April, and hopefully for not too much longer. But yeah, the idea is that you approach is, I mean, there's many routes to funding, and the route in New Zealand is obviously quite different and be subject of another podcast to what you do in America. But yeah, we're trying for development funding from the Film Commission, which is always a good first step.
So there you go. Only because I'm in Dunedin, that's why it's on the Dunedin page. It's showing in Dunedin in the middle of November, 13th at the Regent, 15th at Rialto. And if people want to know more about you, Oliver Lux is where they can come and see some of your work, and you've got some of your work up the top there, and more information about who you are.
Great, thanks. Cool.
Hey, Ollie, it's been a lot of fun talking to you. I really, when I saw the content of this, I really wanted to have a chat. So I'm glad we've been able to connect. Thank you. I thank you for your time. Hopefully you're nice and safe in Montreal at the moment, safe from all this world pandemic we're going through.
Yeah, it's sort of more normalized here. I know it's different in New Zealand because you haven't dealt with it so head on, but over here, once you get used to wearing a face mask in there, it becomes normal pretty quickly. So yeah, I think.
Well,
I think you're right.
We'll let you go, continue your press junket for other New Zealand media and stuff as well. And just thank you for your time. And I will encourage again everyone to get out and see There Is No I in Threesome at the New Zealand International Film Festival. If you're like me and you do the VPN thing, you can see it on HBO Max as well. And yeah, it's brilliant, mate. Really enjoyed it. Enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, cheers.
All right,